and he's giving us
Just the only.
done level 5 together for an emergency.
Yeah, I
Oh, no.
So
I had to. There was
It
some
took ages actually, but there's so much quality buses.
Rightio.
It's basically because
And that's what I mean. Now it's
that
around 2 hours.
I hope you came in here by bus.
Okay. We are
quite
live
tricky for
now, I
you guys.
think, recording and all up and going. Yep, so we'll open the Strategy and Planning Committee and call you all to order. Thank you.
Sorry.
Tēnā koutou katoa, welcome along. And we have 2 papers on the agenda today, potentially. Apologies, just one from Councillor Deaker. We have Lynn Carter on Zoom with us, I think, as well. Anyone else on Zoom? No?
Move that for you.
Move the apology for Councillor Deaker, thank you. Councillor Hope, seconded. Councillor Kelleher, all in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. No public forum. In terms of the agenda, we have a late addition, which is the Natural and Built Environments paper that you've received. It was pre-circulated and tabled as well. So I don't know whether we need to formally move the inclusion of that, but we may as well. So Councillor Hope and seconded Councillor Noon, all in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Just a reminder on conflict of interest, if that occurs at any point, yeah, please remove yourselves. Confirmation of minutes is there. So they're from the 12th of May and have been circulated. Somebody care to move those?
Right.
That was Councillor Hope, was it? Yep. And seconded Councillor Wilson. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Now, outstanding actions from resolutions of the committee. The only one that I could see there that was overdue on page 9 there of your agenda is South Dunedin Harbourside Natural Hazards Adaptation Program and Report Back. I think it's potentially come up a few times now, but is still there. And it has a tally on it now of 123 days overdue. So we must be counting the days. But, you know, it's important and something that we need to work towards and discuss how we will have a conversation on that important matter, because we have a very important role. Which is, yeah, even outlined through our notified RPS recently, but a range of other legislation as well on natural hazards and adaptation. Okay, Councillor Hope.
Checking with you, Chair Robertson, the hold-up's not us.
Yes, no, that's my understanding of. I don't know if we've had a comment on this before. I don't know if the situation's changed at all. Did you want to comment, Sarah? Or sorry, yeah.
Other than the situation hasn't changed, I do see Aaron or Mayor Hawkins from time to time, and each time I do see him, I remind him that we haven't resolved that action. So yeah, he's aware that we're not holding things up. To answer your question.
Councillor Hobbs.
I wonder if maybe we should write a formal letter saying that we would like to consult with DCC this issue and the one that we've got, you know, and transport or whatever.
Definitely.
And it actually becomes a written letter.
Well
we
done.
might get an answer.
I'll second sending that letter.
Thank you.
Can we have a mover and a seconder on actions?
Yep.
Yep, great. Okay, so we've got Councillor Hobbs, and did you second that, Councillor Noon?
I did.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Calvert did. Thank you. So the motion was to write a formal letter on the action point, which is, yeah, as it says there, the South Dunedin / Harbourside Natural Hazards Adaptation Program, to have a discussion on that. Is that correct?
Yep. Through the chair, just to be clear, the letter is just focused on the South Dunedin situation and not.
Yes.
You could add and
passenger transport, because passenger transport is being dealt with, and Mayor Hawkins has already agreed to meet with us. Unfortunately, it didn't happen today because of slight miscommunication, but that is going to happen.
We have
That's
other
the feeling.
programs and work streams happening there. Yep.
That is-
And the action point does focus on South Dunedin Harbourside, not that
Okay.
one. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got that there. We've moved into secondary. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving on from that then to the first paper. Thank you. We're going to discuss next of all the engagement and the draft significant engagement and Māori participation policy, a Mahiro Rika. So I think, yes, sorry, Councillor Lord, have you got your hand up for a?
Oh, sorry, I just
reason?
wanted to speak to the issue, but are you going to ask questions first?
I think we'll have it presented, if that's okay. If you've got something to say, give you a chance to do that, run through it. It's our first time seeing that, where it's come from, and then we'll have some questions. Yep.
Madam Chair, because I'm on the hearing.
Sure,
I
yep.
withdraw for-
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Wilson and Scott are just leaving, because they
Right.
recommended to be here. The Councillor Deek is away today. Yep.
So just an introduction. So this has previously been discussed at a workshop on in February earlier this year. It was part of a review of the communications strategy, which ended up being 3 different pieces of work, this being one, and the first one to formally come back through council. There is also a practice plan that guides the internal work, and there's some work on our stakeholder engagement mapping and our improving our relationship and engagement with stakeholders that's going on. So those were the 3 pieces of work. This significance engagement Māori participation policy, or Hamahi Rōrika, serves a number of purposes, as we discussed at that workshop. Firstly, there's the statutory requirement that council has under the LGA to adopt a significance and engagement policy, and ORC does have one, and it was approved again in the recent LTP process. This would be an update of that document and meet our statutory responsibilities in that order. But more than that, it makes public our commitment that is confirmed through council strategic directions, our partnership with Mana Whenua, but also our commitment to engage with the community, which is a very important part of this document. So the partnership with Mana Whenua is primary and front and centre in terms of the document, in terms of our strategic directions, but it also sets out our commitment to our community and our stakeholders with the way in which we will engage with them on issues. So that is the purpose of this, and it's I guess what we are seeking to do through this document, should it be adopted in the future. Today we're seeking approval to proceed to consultation, because it is an update to the significance and engagement policy. It needs to go through a formal consultation process that we will, which is why we've also sought through the recommendations to appoint Councillors Deaker, Wilson and Scott to hear those submissions. And then it will come back to the table, to the council for consideration for final adoption. At that time, it will also have gone through a graphic design process. We haven't done that at this stage, but it will be part of the final document. So the public document at the end of this process will be formally designed. So that's a little bit of background, I guess, the purpose of this report, and obviously happy to take questions. Thanks, Gretchen.
Councillor Laws, you had your hand up first.
I just want to take you to page 21, and it says the right conversations, our practice principles. And there are a series of bullet points there that are the values and practice principles that inform this paper. And it starts with, we are Team ORC and speak with one consistent voice. That's the first one. What does that mean?
So for me, that means that ORC has a consistent understanding of the issue or the conversation we're having, and we can communicate that clearly, not deliver a number of different messages across the different parts of the organisation in a way that may be confusing for the community.
So I just want to make sure that that is not intended to inhibit freedom of speech and freedom of dissent around this table.
No, not at all.
Good, we've got that clarified. The second issue is, the second bullet point is we deliver on our commitments to mana whenua. Why isn't that say Māori?
I'm wondering, Edward, if I could hand that question to you in terms of the feedback from Okaha around the use of the appropriate terms in the document. Is that appropriate?
Page
Kia ora,
18.
I think it's turned
Yes, it's on.
on. The partnership and working engagement the ORC have under the various pieces of legislation, RMA, local government, is largely with, in terms of environmental matters, is with mana whenua. It's the people who hold the treaty right, who have the identity and mana over their resources, their places. So mana whenua is being more specific in terms of this, and this is a detailed underpinning strategy or matters of importance. So I think that's being specific. If it were to use the term Māori, then that potentially could be confusing. Māori can have a say, as they can have under the Local Government Act in various public policy processes. But if the ORC were to rely on that and think they were being in communication with the right people on water, land, coast, environmental matters, then that runs the risk of confusing who they're talking to.
I'm glad you clarified that, because I think you've confused the legislation. In fact, you mentioned the Resource Management Act. This isn't a significance policy under the Resource Management Act. This is a significance policy under the Local Government Act of 2002. And I'm sorry, but mana whenua don't feature. Māori do. So again, I ask the question, why, when you've got a local government significance policy under a legislative act, which is the Local Government Act, are mana whenua signalled out when they're not actually in the act, but Māori aren't? Who are?
You look at page 17 of 38, you will find reference to the Local Government Act and Māori and mana whenua,
There's no reference in the act to mana whenua.
Okay.
Find
and
it.
explains it. Read the
Mr.
three
Ellison,
paragraphs.
did you want to respond? I think the question was back to you.
I would, under section 6E of the Resource Management Act,
So there you go.
talks about taonga, wahitapu, and other values. That goes straight to the treaty right.
No, but sorry, the question is specific. This is a significance policy. You understand what I'm saying, Richard, under the Local Government Act. If we had a different relationship with mana whenua, that's fine, and we actually do. But this is significant policy that takes its legislative backing from a particular piece of legislation. Now, I'm asking the question of you. Why aren't Māori in here when they're in the Act?
So I guess my answer on this, and again, I'd certainly defer to Edward if I say something out of turn here, is our relationship at the council level for a lot of the decisions that we make and a lot of the projects we undertake are with mana whenua who have the connection with the land within Otago. Māori are picked up or are covered, and sorry, that's probably not the appropriate term, but when we talk about our commitments to the broader community, that includes Māori. But there is a specific commitment and through our projects with mana whenua. And our Māori partnership that we have undertaken through our strategic directions to improve is specifically around us having a stronger partnership and delivering these projects and engaging with mana whenua. If there is the desire for Māori to be involved, they absolutely have the opportunity as part of the community who we are committing to engage with.
Madam Chair, the Act specifically says, and I quote, improve opportunities
I don't
for
think
Māori
that's a
to
question.
contribute to local government decision making. Now there it is in the
Yep.
Act. You know what it
Okay,
says.
so I think Richard's answered
But
that,
that's not a
and I
question.
guess it's similar to other legislation in that there's an overarching thing, and then how you implement it in your region is defined through your policies, and I think that's what Richard's answer was. If we want to debate that, that's
Right.
totally fine, and we can do that. Are there, finish the questions? Okay, Councillor Hobbs, you were next.
No, I was just going to read the bit out that linked mana whenua to Māori, as in Local Government Act, section 77(1)(c).
Hey, anyone else choosing to ask any questions on the wider policy? No.
Happy to move the recommendations.
And I'll second it if you like.
Okay, very good. Okay, we have a number of recommendations. Sorry, I'm just going back to that, but I was expecting more questions.
Oh, because it's a very good policy.
Yeah, no, that's good. So we have, oh gosh, sorry, yeah, I'm showing you the totally wrong bit.
You say 771C. Doesn't say anything about.
So you've moved all of them together?
The
Yep.
four.
All four, yep.
Yep.
And everyone understands what those are. There was just a recommendation perhaps that, oh no, that's just noting that it's 19th of July 2021, but that's probably pretty obvious anyway. So, yep, we've got the mover. Who was the seconder?
Me.
Okay, and discussion. So,
A couple of comments.
Yep.
I think the important thing is that we have in train and have had in train for a number of years engagement with mana whenua at all different levels on different matters, and as recently as earlier in the week we had our mana to mana meeting that occurs 4 times a year, where we discussed various numbers of items on the agenda, and so my point is we've actually had an engagement for a number of years. What this does, that consolidates it into our significant engagement policy going forward, and this is a consultation process before we actually adopt a new policy. So it's actually an opportunity for the wider community to feed back in a public process, and then we will make a final call on what that policy looks like. So Councillor Laws did mention about freedom of speech, and I think this is a great opportunity to allow that to happen, so we can then assess the appropriate policy going forward once we've heard from the wider community.
pause, yeah.
Well, I mean, I raised this in the workshop, so this will be no surprise to my governance colleagues. I do not think that this significance policy meets our requirements under the Local Government Act of 2002. In fact, it manifestly does not. It elevates a very small group of people, mana whenua of Kaitahu in this region, to be the representative of Māori under the Act, and that's wrong. The treaty, it also misinterprets completely what the Treaty of Waitangi is and the judicial interpretation of it. The Treaty of Waitangi is a relationship between the Crown and Māori. It's a collective. It's not a series of individual entities. And it's really important that it's understood it's a relationship between the Crown and Māori. And throughout New Zealand, this is a bit of an Emperor's Close argument, really. Throughout New Zealand, a whole series of Māori wards are being discussed and debated, and rightly so, in terms of whether or not they elevate Māori in the decision-making process. The reason why those debates and discussions are occurring is because Māori are so, I guess, discouraged, disenfranchised, lots of other words, disgusted, I don't know, with local government decision making, to the point that that's reflected in the turnout of Māori who vote. It's less than 1 in 5 in many of those locales. And Maori feel alienated from local government and certainly from local government elections. It's a shame. It's just the reason why. So a number of councils throughout New Zealand, whether they be regional or TAs, look at ways in which they can make that voice be known. And in Otago, there is a view that, well, Māori shall be represented by kaitahu, or particularly local runanga of our kaitahu, and the representative voices that are represented here. But I'm going to say that that doesn't satisfy the Act at all. And in actual fact excludes all Māori who are non-mana whenua from being involved in decision-making processes. The argument that, oh, they're part of the community is just specious and wrong. The Act says, and it's right at the start of the Act, improve opportunities for Māori to contribute, not mana whenua, not iwi. The member, Marion Hobbs, said, well, we'll look at section 77(1)(c) of the Act. It mentions mana whenua. It does not. It does not. And in fact, the Local Government Act, which is what we are looking at the moment, obliges us to have a significant policy that improves Māori decision-making. All Māori who are resident in our region. The relationship with mana whenua could be handled in many other ways, but this is not the way. And we have a mana to mana committee that does that. That has some sort of partnership document, as I understand it.
Terms of reference.
Terms of reference, thank you. But this is specific again. The other thing that seems excluded here is it spends an awful lot of time, this particular document, talking about the relationship between the ORC and mana whenua. It spends very little time talking about the community in general. And there are a whole series of communities that I would argue are alienated from the Otago Regional Council. And we know who those communities are. But again, we lump them in collectively and just say it's the community. For that reason, I cannot support this as being a draft policy that go out. I believe that it is both legally and politically deficient and that it will not improve either Māori in our decision-making process as a toto or the community at large.
Councillor Hobbs.
Well, I want to, one, thank you for your paper, and secondly, very strongly endorse this move. I think I've been on an extraordinary learning thing for 73 years, and I've only felt really comfortable probably in the last 5 years of my political life about relationships with the tangata whenua. You look at every report that comes out, and Māori are prison, not surviving in our schools, not surviving in our hospitals. It goes on and on and on. And it begs the question about how we work with our treaty partners. I want to say the word partners. This is not about putting one Māori around a table of 12 people. This is not about putting Māori, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use a generic term Māori here, Māori as the part of the list we tick off when we consult, of the same equality as coes or fish and game, okay? These are our treaty partners. This is a very different status. And it is for Māori as well to determine exactly how that partnership does. And Māori have worked up in the number of years and through legislation, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was the whole concept, well, this concept has always been there, but the whole works and governance of establishing that partnership and how Māori can get information from its own people. Scatter it around and you've got great deal of difficulty. Put it inside an iwi and hapu and I'm going to forget the other word. Never mind, it's gone. Put it within there and you get a structure for decision making. This to me is a strong way forward and I really recognise it. And thank you for the paper.
Councillor Calvert and then Mr. Allison.
I have a lot of sympathy with how we've got to the point we have, and I have no problem with the engagement with mana whenua in particular. Sooner or later, the government needs, in my view, central government needs to stop papering over and pretending that there isn't an issue here where we've got one part of our partnership being an elected part, which is elected directly from the people of New Zealand in a variety of ways, including in central government Māori wards, as it were, Māori seats, and in other issues we have unelected but appointed iwi and other representatives. I have a lot of sympathy and I have a lot of feeling for, and we're very lucky here to have the mana whenua we have, and we have been honoured by having them. I think they've served us really well, but I do think that sooner or later central government has to grapple with the idea that we've got two parts of a thing, one of which is an elected part and the other of which is appointed by a particular group of part. And that's not the fault at all of the mana whenua in our area. They're doing their best to achieve the aspirations of and things for the good of Māori in our area. And I think we've been lucky enough to have them wanting to achieve things for all of us, as it happens, and our environment. But I do think there's a problem in there that is not of our making around this table, and it's not of our mana whenua's making. And everyone's trying to get the best out of the structure we've got. But sooner or later we do have to. Somebody has to face up to the fact that we've got an awkward pairing between an appointed lot of people and an elected lot of people. And I don't see how we get through that. For today, I think we're sort of doing what we can, but it is actually something that central government needs to engage in and be honest and open and find a way through with.
First of all, I'd just like to also thank, I think the paper's very good. It's comforting for us as mana whenua to know this level of detail is there in terms of policy and the significance in terms of addressing significance. It's probably, it doesn't work for us just to come along and have input into RPS or a regional plan or to have an MOU. At the end of the day, regional council needs to be confident that it's covered and has the detail behind it. Otherwise, that's where we've had divergence in the past. People forget what the role is, of what their responsibilities are, who they're responsible to. And so I am fully endorsing the policy, the draft policy that's going out for public consultation. It's a necessary building block in terms of building partnership with mana whenua, with the people who have the mana over Waiwata whenua and the Tai Moana. So on that, I completely support it. I think we're going to options at some point, but just on the wards, I don't really want to get drawn into that, but other than to say the current legislation doesn't address, it's not a one size fits all across the country. Full stop. The treaty is held at a whānau hapu level, not at an iwi or Māori level. I am a direct descendant of a signatory, and I think and our people have been adherents to that treaty, I'll tell you, from day one.
Mm. You got Lynn on.
Oh, sorry, Lynn. Yeah, you've probably been waiting a wee while.
No, that's no problem. No.
That's okay.
Lynn and then you, Kevin.
Kia ora. I just want to tautoko what our POA
Edward has been saying. And just to reiterate that the so-called treaty relationship between iwi and the Crown is actually between the Crown and the signatories of the treaty, some of who are the ones who hold the mana whenua in particular areas. So just supporting Edward again, and just saying our treaty settlement process has reiterated our rangatira in this area, and we are the mana whenua of this area, and that is who the partnership is with. So kia ora.
Yeah, look, thanks for the paper and thanks for your explanations as we've gone through, and thanks for your explanations, Edward. Look, I just, reading it, I think one of the key drivers in me originally standing for ORC was a disconnect with our communities. And I firmly believe that this document intends to break that. We have been working really, really good over the last, I'd say, 12 months or so, actually breaking some of those barriers down. And if we look at our engagement policy and practice principles and our right conversation tags, you know, I think they're very, 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 very strong. Having robust conversations with our communities and stakeholders, and ensuring that we're making decisions that reflect the views and aspirations of the people of Otago. So I think if we can keep heading down that path, we're going to end up with a much stronger organisation that already is going in a very good path. So well put together. We'll see what the submitters say, and the odd one of us might just put a wee submission to change a word here or there. But yeah, well done, and I think it's a step in a very good direction.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment? Councillor Forbes?
Just as the seconder of this motion, I completely support where we're going. I understand Michael's kind of very positivist view of the Act, but we're not in that scenario, and this paper has sensitively dealt with where we are and our partnership, which is with mana whenua, not tangata whenua. They have another role to play, and they'll play that in another way. So I'm very, very happy with the way that it is, and I think, Richard, that you and your team have actually taken this on in a very, very sensitive way. I'm really pleased with it, and I won't be commenting on any words. It's good, and thank you. So as a seconder, I'm happy to.
Thank you. Look, not going to say too much other than I concur totally with Councillor Laws, except I won't vote against it because I think the numbers are there for it to be supported, and also that I would like to see what the community thinks.
Right, yeah, well, I'd like to say that I think this is a great step forward for the council as well in terms of having a clear policy, and yeah, I agree with Kevin that the right conversations part, particularly in terms of our approach, is fantastic. I like the fact that we've picked up on all the aspects of our strategic session we've had and our strategy that came out of that, and I think this provides a lot of clarity for the community, for ourselves as governors, and also for staff as they're working with the community. I like the fact that we're talking about being up near the collaborate and empower end of that scale most of the time, but we need to pick the best fit as well so that we're not over consulting with people and involving them at the wrong level as well, so that it all becomes overwhelming. I think it's been really carefully crafted. A lot of work's gone into this, and I thank Kai Tahu and Okaha for the really careful thinking and a heap of work that's gone into producing this. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, now it's time for the community to have a say on what they think, and the fair thing for us to do is put it out there and listen carefully. So thanks for the discussion. We have got a mover. Did you want to write a reply?
All I wanted to add was, just for clarity, recommendation 1 should reference option 1 in the paper, so there's a clear connection with what's being supported, what's being promoted in these recommendations.
we're about to put this, but you've got something to
Yes, I do want to know if we may. I don't know how everyone feels about this, but I'm going to ask. In the recommendation number 2, we appoint councillors Deaker, Wilson and Scott to hear the submissions and recommendations of council. Often we don't, as a council, hear the report back of actually how it went for the 3. Not necessarily always talking about the applicants, but just how it went. I mean, for example, PTP, we've asked Ms. Councillor Forbes today about it, and I don't know what the protocol is, but how can we ensure that we hear from those 3, please? Is that possible?
How would we, yeah.
So I think my expectation when we, and I'd have to just confirm this with councillors Deaker, Wilson and Scott, but when we brought a paper back to council for consideration, my expectation would be that that is the time at which they would share their experiences through the hearings and how that might relate to any changes that have been recommended to the final document. So that should happen as part of the process when we bring that paper back.
Thank you.
A hearings report, potentially, at least a verbal one, but probably a hearings one on the decisions, what was heard, how many,
Appreciate that
Thank
very
you.
much.
Councillor Calvert.
Yes, I've got just a question about what recommendation 4 means. I would have thought after the consultation it would turn back up as a proposal proposed by the whatever they are. I'm confused about the formal design process prior to being presented.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yep.
So the proposal is that the document will be and we don't have the probably the best example is the Mana Whakahono of West Coast Regional Council as a finished product, although it will be reflective of engagement with the broader community as well. So at the moment it's a Word document. The intent is that it will be designed. That is absolutely on the understanding that it will be coming back as a draft for approval, but it means that council will get to see it in a designed form before approval rather than it being designed after the fact. So it's part of the approval process. It will come back in draft.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. The wording isn't quite correct to pick up what's coming back.
Yes,
finalised submission is not what it is. It's a design standard draft, whatever it is.
Is it the draft document, if you put the word draft in there?
Yeah.
It's the draft significant engagement and Maori participation policy
just
following hearings.
The draft
Proposed.
policy, post submissions, the draft policy will return.
Well, you've been just a draft
Or
document.
is it the proposed?
It's already post submission.
Yeah, we have the draft, so it's something proposed, no.
If you got notes, the draft document is subject to formal design process prior to being presented to the council for final adoption. So just put the draft document in there.
The tweaking.
The word draft, and that means if we bring the draft
Yeah,
back to us,
so-
we're happy with that. Adopt
So
it.
sorry, it's 4, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's finalised submission, that's the problem.
No, it's subject to a formal design process. I think it just wants to come back.
Yeah, I think Kevin's point is probably spot on. So the
Yeah.
the forward read notes the draft document is Thanks, Hillary.
Okay, got that then?
Yes.
We all understand and we're ready to go.
So we've changed number 1 too, have we?
You've got that,
Include
yeah.
option 1, yeah. To be option.
Okay, then we have the mover and the seconder, all in favour,
Aye.
against,
No.
carried.
Lynn's trying to get your attention.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying.
Lynn was voting.
Oh, she was voting.
You're voting and you're voting for, we're
Not drowning, just
assuming,
waiting.
yep. Great, thanks.
Too late to get a yes in.
It is carried, thank you.
Yeah, noted, Laws, and me too,
Yep,
please.
great. Second paper then. NBA, but not the basketball sort.
Sadly.
You really are a sports person, aren't you? Oozes out of you.
Yep, I love basketball. I'm sure I love this NBA as well.
Surprised to be in the league, did you?
As long as they get filled out.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Polly.
So I think you've all got a
Oh, you
printed
can.
version as well as a version
So this
that
paper
you
is
received
the
earlier.
it's the same as the one on here.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the briefing paper. Oh, sorry, welcome back.
It's NBA time. You don't sing away.
There's quite a delay in listening to it.
Sorry, we're just waiting for our councillors to return that were out of the room to anyone that can't see that on YouTube or Zooming. So yeah, we're just going to get underway now. So we have now got Sylvie Leduc and we also have Amanda there, but I think Sylvie, you're presenting the paper, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, it's correct.
And yeah, it's a brief paper and looking towards basically a first opportunity for the council to have a say at this stage, knowing that it's pretty draft at this point, and the process for how we would have that say. So yeah, Sylvie, did you want to say anything else?
Yeah, tēnā koutou. No, not really. Really, the paper is really about the process of how we're going to submit on the exposure draft of the NBA. So 2 weeks ago, we had a workshop on the reforms, and we already knew that there would be 2 opportunities to provide feedback or to engage on the resource management reform, and this is the first opportunity. So the government has released an exposure draft of the Natural and Built Environments Act, which will be the key replacement of the RMA. It focuses on the first parts of the bill, so the purpose, outcomes, and environmental management frameworks that the bill is proposed to put in place, and the planning architecture. It's been referred to a select committee inquiry, and the submissions are due on the 4th of August, and there is no strategy and planning committee meeting or council meeting scheduled during that time. So it's really about how do we go about getting the submission prepared during that time, knowing that we are also working towards a joint submission with the other council across Otago and Southland. So we're likely to have a joint submission and have a complementary submission from ORC.
So yeah, could we understand that part then, first of all, of how we are appointing through this process people to help craft our submission, but there's a different separate submission that's on behalf of Otago Southland, or how's that working? Or are we feeding our one through into that process?
So, I mean, providing we managed in the current timeframes to actually develop a joint submission, we would have a joint submission across all council in Otago and Southland, and very likely another submission from ORC going into more details and giving our key points. And I expect that the joint submission would be at a higher level. Given the tight time frame, whether we manage to develop that joint submission or whether we just develop common messages that we weave through each submission is something that we have to discuss with the other councils.
Councillor Laws.
I accept we're in a sort of hiatus because you haven't quite worked out whether it's going to go from the region or the province. The region as in Otago Southland and the province of Otago. But it seems to me that the chance for us to feed back into this is very limited. Now, there's an intermediate step that seems to be missing, and I wonder if you've considered it, and that is the idea that once you've worked out whether or not it's going to come from Otago or Otago Southland, or even some entity of all of the regional councils in the South Island would be even more useful. How do we get feedback into that submission. And I'm suggesting to you, have you thought about sending us a copy of the draft submission or the submission so that prior to the 11th of August, so that we can give you some feedback before you send it off to the select committee on the 4th?
Yes, I suppose the proposal is to go through the co-chairs of the Strategy and Planning Committee. So we can definitely distribute a draft of the submission.
So
And if you can channel through the co-chairs and we deal directly with Councillor Wilson and Councillor
we will
Robertson.
probably need then to put that into the motions, because at the moment it's just the co-chairs. We're not going to see it. So I'd like to see
I
it
do
before it goes.
understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
and that would be fine. I think Kate and I talked about this, and we're happy to be the conduit for collating everyone's thoughts. But I'm trying to understand as well. You're wanting us to bring back Otago Southlands collective as well as, say, an ORC.
No, I'm just, but that hasn't been decided yet. We're in this state. There's no criticism intended.
No,
it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But once it's decided, what I'm trying to do is when that draft submission's done, we see it before we go and have the opportunity to contribute.
Yeah.
And if you and is it Kate?
Yeah.
Can channel that, that's cool.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. Let's go. Did you want to
I
say
was just going to say, it's my understanding that a joint submission will probably go up through the Otago and Southland mayoral forums. And that's the way that would be dealt with. And then the detailed ORC submission, which would contain elements of the joint submission or the joint submission and any additional detail and specific comment. If you haven't had a look already, I'd encourage you to, because it's really short. The exposure draft is really short, so it's not, there's not a lot in it. It's not difficult to digest in a half hour. Yeah.
Councillor Hobbs.
Yeah, I'm not too, I appreciate the attempts to get a submission into the exposure draft, but I just want to say it's an exposure draft. And it's another tool to try and get people engaged in it before they completely finalise, and they must be very close to it, the actual bill that will be introduced into the House following the report. And I think the report back of exposure draft in October, it'll be early October, because my reading of the timeline says that they want to get through select committee and second committee of the whole and third readings by lifting on December the 24th.
You're joking.
No, I'm not joking. They are moving. They are on a roll.
Oh,
So this exposure draft is just the first steps. Where I really want us to focus is when we face the bill. So and as soon as the bill gets released to us, that's when we've got to.
Can I pick up on that and ask that question then? We're making a submission to the exposure draft. Do we get the opportunity to make an exposure on the bill?
We should.
On the bill?
Yes.
Yes, but when's the bill being introduced?
The bill's being introduced, I would say, by the end of October or mid-October, and that'll go first reading. That's just 2 hours, and then it'll go be sent to select committee. And select committee will not be just meeting 1 day a week. They'll be attempting to do this in October, November, and then back into the House for 3 days worth of work in the House.
Oh.
Opportunities to have a say that you, maybe Sylvie.
I don't think there's full clarity on how that's going to take place, although I know that there is some discussion with the regional sector as a whole about how the regional sector might be more engaged in more detail. Up until now, it's been a relatively closed process. There hasn't been a lot of discussion or a lot of opportunity for involvement. I think the exposure draft will probably open that up, because then there'll be a sense of how much concern there is around the direction of travel. And I guess having read it, my kind of take on where it takes us is it just really builds on the environmental limit setting that we're already needing to do. It further cements treaty partners in process. It is clear about the role of elected members in policy making and how that will decrease because you'll go to regional planning committees. So, I mean,
And spatial stuff.
yeah, there's a tiny bit of urban stuff, but actually primarily it's talking kind of regional council language to me in terms of NPSs and the way that we already talk about environmental limit setting and things that we consider. So the language of avoid, remedy and mitigate is still present, as is the precautionary principle. So that's just off the top of my head, but you know, I think it just further cements the journey that we have been on and have seen through the freshwater NPS review of last year, in my view.
Thank you. Councillor Calvert, then Hope.
I've got some serious concerns about at least one part of this. And I'll focus on that because I think that what we're being asked to do here is approve our chairs to approve something that we don't quite know what submission will turn up to be, and it'll be gone before we see it, and maybe that doesn't matter. But the thing that I would like to focus on, I would not like to see us sending up north without comment, is this planning committee with appointments in every region, members of planning committees appointed by the Minister of Conservation, mana whenua, each constituent council, and supported by a secretariat funded by us guys. We don't even know how many people are on that. That could be 12 people, of which 3 of them are local body people, and we're supposed to be funding it. That is a whole heap of crap. If that's a government committee who is allowing us to have possibly a representative on it, not that that representative will give us anything like a majority, so we will just be a minor thing in a bigger government cog who's going to make decisions anyway. Why on earth would we be funding the secretariat for that? And in any case, we have no idea what size that is and how many people and whether we will have any real say. So this is a pretense at democracy, a pretense at taking other people along with it in a committee that is likely to be stacked by central government, paid for by us, because they've said no more taxes, so it's a ratepayer funded thing that we haven't got on any of our plans. And at the end of the day, they'll be able to say, the government will be able to say, this committee made up of all of you people agreed to this, and we will not have a majority or anything like it on that committee. We have no idea about it, but we can assume that this is essentially a central government arrangement. So I would not like to see us thinking that that was a fine thing to do, to go ahead and we'll pay for it, we'll support it. We've got no idea who it is, but we do know that we're not in charge of it at all. And that feeds back to our chief executive's comment, I think not so long, was it a public comment? Yeah, in a public workshop comment that when you've got a committee or a decision-making body, you need to think whether it's got ownership and who are the owners of the decisions that come out of it. And I don't want to be an owner of a decision that haven't got the ability to have any direct feedback into in any useful fashion, and we're not a majority on or anything.
I'm just thinking, we've got Councillor Hope next, but just, yeah, thinking about the best way that Kate and I can do our role then of harnessing your thoughts, because it is fundamental reform, and people will want to feed in and will need to have a read of the document thoroughly. So I'm wondering if we could, well, yeah, one idea would be to do some broad, high-level questions to you on specific areas of the Act and try and pull them together. Because for Kate and I to go away just with Sylvia and off we go, when the government is looking for our initial feel, it's probably, well, I feel that it's fair to ask you all what your feelings are. Do you think that as well, Kate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
I think it'd be
So
good.
we'll try and come up with some questions that we can extract your thoughts in an efficient way, but manage to get what are the issues for Otago. And we'll obviously work with Sylvie and with Sarah where needed to be informed and to have your ideas as well, as many as we can, to try and get where we're at in Otago. Edward and Lynn as well as part of this committee. If you've got the time and want to be involved in that process, that'd be fantastic. Sorry, Councillor Hope.
It's fine. Chair Robinson, all I was going to ask was the second part was the exposure draft does not include provisions on, and there's from A to D. And I don't know if it's a Mrs. Gardner question or to the two ladies down there. Thank you for being here. Was it a surprise or no surprise that these from A to D weren't included?
It wasn't a surprise. It was already, the government had already communicated on the fact that that would come through in December through the whole bill, when the whole bill is released.
I thought that was the case, but I just wanted to check.
I think it's important, just to be really clear, I think we should just be clear that we might need to reserve the right for the staff to make a submission.
Yes,
The reason why I'm saying that is I think there's a difference between a political point of view and the technical point of view that we might have around how some of this will work. Yeah, so I don't think we need a recommendation in there. I just want you to be aware that we may choose to do that.
And
You can
that's
do it as
always,
individuals as well.
an option and has been done before. Yep.
Yeah. Don't we have any time between now and the 4th of August, though, to have a chat in exactly the same way that we are now?
Want us to call a
No,
special
if we
meeting?
do.
We
No,
can.
not a special meeting, but we've got committee meetings.
No,
we
no,
haven't
We've got
not
nothing.
between now and
There's
then.
nothing.
We've got nothing for
I'm
4
trying
weeks.
to think of
No,
the process
yes.
of how
Take it
we
off,
can
Michael.
reviews.
Just take the whole time off.
Oh, that's just,
Yeah.
but we've got, then we can meet. If we've got nothing
Well,
for 4 weeks.
So we can come up with some questions pretty quickly,
It's gonna be my
probably,
question.
and then
No, we could do
we'll
a Zoom
have
bloody conference.
perhaps a week for you to give feedback, and then we're going to have to get on to drafting.
Actually, Zooming would be.
Would we like an extra resolution saying we note that the staff may have wished to provide a submission
If you'd like to.
as well, or
notify
you don't
us,
want
that'd
to?
be
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that you need one, but you could.
Do you show, sorry, do you show us that, or do you give us an outline of why you've done it, or where
Yeah.
you see the deficiencies or the good things?
Well,
I'm not saying it's
Well, I mean, there
yeah.
might be some things we can put in, but for example, just taking Councillor Calvert's points about the planning committee, but from a technical point of view, the planning committee could actually work really well. And one of the things that it may well avoid is the months and months and months we spend in mediation on individual plans. So that's a point that we might want to make as staff. But if you as politicians are saying we don't like the planning committee, you wouldn't necessarily want to point that out in your submission.
Okay.
That's why I'm saying then it might be useful to split it.
Yep.
I don't actually, as it happens, disapprove of the idea of having a committee such as that. Just don't let's pretend it's something it isn't. That's all.
Okay. Right. Okay. Moving. No, talking.
I'm happy to
Councillor.
move, but I was just going to follow up on, I'll move first.
And I'll
And a
second.
seconder,
Yeah.
Councillor Hobbs.
I
Yep.
was just going to follow up on your suggestion, Madam Chair, with if you and Kate crafted some sort of broad questions to receive some feedback from whoever, whatever members want the feedback in that process. And then once you've got something finalised, if that was circulated to get an acceptance, and then retrospectively, obviously, we will sign it off when we get back together for strategy and planning further down the track. So I think that at least gives us confidence that you've got the support of the team, even though it's informal. But it's that step that we can all put a hand up and say, yes, we were in favour of it, even though it was informally, but ratified at a later date. I'm comfortable with that.
We might have to be star NBA players, I think, to manage to pull together the diverse views into something everyone's happy with. But we'll give it an absolute shot. Yep.
You want me to draw that play?
Absolutely, that'd be fantastic. Was there someone else who had their hand up? No. Rightio, so we have a mover and a seconder then, and it's for all of the recommendations. We're not adding the one about the separate staff report, although yeah, that is standard practice in the past as well. So recommendations there, 5 of them I have. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Brilliant. Thanks very much. And that closes our committee meeting for the day. Thank you.
Good 3-pointer there, Councillor Wilson.